Good morning or good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Pierrick Martel. I'm in charge of product marketing at Centreon. Today is our second webinar in a series of 3 webinars related to the 20.10 software release that we've just released a few weeks ago. Today we have people from Spain, Andorra, Germany, Romania, Italy, Brazil, and a few other countries. So we'll try to all speak English and be clear in our explanation, or whether if you have questions, please ask your questions in the question tool on the right-hand side. I will see them on the screen, and at the end of the presentation, I will ask these questions to Laurent Pinsivy, who is the product manager at Centreon, and is the one who is presenting this webinar. Today we'll cover 5 topics. One is about the operating system CentOS 8. One is about SE Linux, our security policy, the multi-factor authentication, and a new protocol being used in our distributed architecture. This is ZeroMQ. So lots of topics. Laurent, I will ask you to unmute your microphone and start with this presentation.
Thank you, Pierrick.
Yes, I'm here. So, first topic is the operating system. If we want a secured Centreon platform, the very first step is to make sure that the operating system is secured. Until now, we were using CentOS 7, which has all the security patches required. Anyway, in the future, that will be CentOS 8, the current operating system. So please, can you tell us when and how the Centreon platform will be able to run under CentOS 8 instead of 7?
Yes, hi everybody. Currently, we are working on the packaging for CentOS 8. Our quality team is validating the Centreon open source and Centreon IT edition. So we will release soon all of these packages in our testing repository. The second step is to ask Centreon community to help us to test all packages to be sure that everything is okay. Then when the quality team, our quality team will finish to validate Centreon Business Edition, we will release in our stable repository all RPM packages. Then we will provide the associated ISO based on CentOS 8 and all virtual machines. If you want to know when we will release these packages, you can follow us on Twitter at Centreon, and we will send a message when testing packages will be available and when stable packages will be available. Even if Red Hat and CentOS provide tools to migrate CentOS V8 server to V7 to V8, we highly recommend you to install a new server and to migrate your data from CentOS 7 to CentOS 8. So once the package will be available in stable repository, we will update our documentation in a migrate chapter to indicate you how to perform this operation. So just to have a look, the migrate chapter is in update, upgrade, and migrate chapter. And currently you have only how to perform a migration from old Centreon to the last Centreon 20.10 on the CentOS 7, and here will appear a new chapter to help you to perform this migration.
All right. Well, thank you. That's quite clear, I think. So the next topic is about security enhanced Linux, because even if you have the latest operating system with the latest security patch, you still want to make sure nobody tries to access unwanted directories. So, in the past, Centreon was not compatible with SC Linux. And at the very beginning of the documentation installing Centreon, it said, please disable SC Linux. And that's finished. Now, SC Linux becomes compatible with Centreon. Great news.
Yes, like for CentOS 8, currently we provide. First, I will explain what is SC Linux. Maybe for people who don't know what is this, it's a kernel module allow for the operating system to control access rights of processes, to be sure that the process don't try to access to an unauthorized directory, or to try to write in a file that it can't have access. So this is for SC Linux. And we used to develop SC Linux rules for Centreon software suite. And for the main process, so for Epic, it's used to provide the web interface. For Centreon broker, used to make communication between different portals. For our scheduler, Centreon engine, and for our another communication process, Centreon Gorgon. So we used to implement SC Linux rules for these four main processes. And I used to explain you at the beginning. Currently, you can find the SC Linux rules in our testing repository for CentOS 7. We are making the rules for CentOS 8. We will ask help for Centreon community to help us to check if every rules are okay. And then we will provide in our stable repository the SC Linux rules for CentOS 8 and 7.
Just to be clear here, the rules we are providing are only for version 20.10, but it's for all editions, open source, IT edition, business editions, and MSP edition, but it's only for 20.10, whether you are on CentOS 7 or 8. Is it clear? Is it right?
Yes, you're right. This rules is only for Centreon 20.10. And of course, when the rules will be available in stable version, we will update the documentation. We will remove the first chapter to disable SC Linux, because when the rules will be available in stable version, it will be the standard of new installation. And of course, we will update the documentation to explain for previous installation how to enable these rules.
Okay, so current customers, they will have the option to enable or not SC Linux with these rules. New customers, the default installation will be with this SC Linux module, kernel module installed, but they will be able to disable it if it's required.
If they want, yes, but
okay, all right, great. So now that we have an operating system which is up to date, SC Linux to make sure nobody writes in the wrong places, there's still maybe some security problems with the application itself, and I thought it was not in the original agenda, but I thought it would be a good idea to remind everybody about our Centreon security policy, how we deal with that kind of problems. So we have 2 slides on this subject. Please go ahead.
Yes, so there is two phases. The first one is to try to prevent vulnerabilities in Centreon software. So since several months now, we used to implement a method to check in how development, how we can prevent vulnerabilities. So we develop when we develop new functionality or patch for a bug, we have robots to analyze how pull requests, and to be sure that we don't implement new vulnerabilities. We have robots that analyze all our sources and make reports about vulnerabilities. It's exactly the same for dependencies. Centreon, we use external dependencies. So we check that for each dependencies we use to implement in Centreon, we use a correct version with fixed vulnerabilities. And our developers are trained to improve code quality and to be sure that no potential vulnerabilities are implemented. And because Centreon have now 15 years ago, there is a lot of legacy code. So if you find vulnerabilities, or if you perform penetration test and you find vulnerabilities, you can send us these vulnerabilities. We have a procedure on our GitHub that's explaining how to contact us. So you can send us an email to security@centreon.com with some information, the version of Centreon, how you some sources file, the proof of concept if you can. And if you want, you can encrypt your email using our public key. So you have how public key to encrypt your email and send us a vulnerability if you discover vulnerabilities. Once we received report test, we try to score each vulnerabilities. We use CVSS method, and we will have a score between 0 and 10. From 1 to 3.9, it means that vulnerability is minor. So Centreon will have around 6 months to fix these vulnerabilities. If the score is between 4 and 6.9, we have between 3 and 6 months to fix the vulnerabilities. And if the score is between 7 to 10, it's high vulnerability. So we will fix this one in the 30 days. So it means you will have the fix in the next minor version. So this is an engagement plane.
Yeah, CVSS means a common vulnerability scoring system. It's a very common scoring system. What it means here is that you must update your Centreon software regularly, because all these fixes that we are making, security fixes, are made in minor versions such as 20.04.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, and the same with 20.10. So please make sure that your platform is always up to date with the latest minor versions of the major version you're running, to make sure you always have the right security patches.
Exactly.
Good. Well, now that the software part is secure, both application and operating system, I guess the next risk is about the user connecting to the platform. So you will talk about authentication and how to implement multi-factor authentication to make sure the users who are connecting to Centreon are the right users.
Exactly. So Centreon offer several kind of authentication methods, but only one authorization method. So you need to make a difference between both. Authentication is to allow a user to access to the web interface using a login password or other system. And once the user is authenticated, Centreon will apply Centreon profile, ACL, access control list, to define access to the menus, the resources, and action on resources. So for authentication method, you have a local user definition. You have LDAP or Microsoft Active Directory authentication. You can use SSO through Kerberos or other system, and we used to implement OpenID Connect on the 20.10 version. So it's because the identity provider you will link to Centreon have possibility to achieve multi-factor authentication that you can use multi-factor authentication in Centreon. Centreon does not perform multi-factor authentication itself. Centreon used to ask to the identity provider to authenticate your user, and once your user is authenticated, the identity provider forward a credential to Centreon, and Centreon logs the user and apply ACL. So I can perform a demonstration about multi-factor authentication. So in my Centreon configuration, I choose to keep local authentication and to add OpenID Connect authentication. So Centreon forward me to Lemon LDAP next generation. So I have to set up my credential. Then the identity providers will send me an email with a second factor. I perform the second factor authentication, and the identity provider forward me to Centreon, and I'm now logged in Centreon, and Centreon applied my Centreon profile.
So obviously here, that was an email because you configured your IDP for email, but it could be an SMS, a text message, or whatever.
It could be an application. In fact, it depends on possibility offered by your identity provider.
All right, thank you.
So we used to update the documentation to explain you how to configure OpenID Connect. So in the administration, Centreon UI menu and OpenID Connect, we'll explain you that we used to test this authentication on Clock and Lemon LDAP NG, but you can use all provider compatible with OpenID and the authorization code flow. So you have to define access to your identity provider, the endpoint of your identity provider, then the client ID, client secret, and you can link Centreon to your identity provider.
Okay, all right. So, that's our last chapter of this webinar, which is a little bit different, this one. This is about our distributed architecture. You all know that we have a central server, pollers, we can have remote servers also, and there is some communication flow in between these various servers. And since maybe a year ago, we've started evolution of the protocols being used to communicate between these servers, and we've implemented a new communication flow based on ZeroMQ with a new software module called Gorgon. And in 20.10, this is becoming the standard communication. I guess the relevance here with security is that these communication flows must be open in your firewalls and whatever is your security infrastructure. So it's good to know which are the new flows and what needs to be open and what is the how are the flows open from which side. So let's try to go into all these details. And again, if you have questions on any of these topics, please ask your questions. You can do it now, and we will answer them right after this presentation.
Okay, just a quick reminder. Centreon Platform have 3 roles. Roles to collect data. Another one is to store collected data into storage. And the last one is to have a web interface to configure the collect of data and to display collected data. All these roles can be present on the same server, or you can use distributed architectures. So when you have all roles on one server, it means simple architecture. So you have the web interface with APIs, the storage, MySQL, and RD tools. You have a broker. Broker is a component to make communication between servers, between pollers and the central to forward collected data. Engine, it's our monitoring engine. Gorgon is a process using ZeroMQ to communicate from the central server to all the pollers to forward configuration, to restart process, to apply action made by a user through the web interface. And plugins are the central plugins to collect data. When you have a distributed architecture, because you want to have several pollers to collect several data, or because you have a geographic or architecture constraint, so you have several pollers, and you have normally on a basic architecture, the poller communicate with the central server using central brokers, and the central server communicate with the poller using Gorgon ZeroMQ. This is normal sense of the flow. But if your poller is in the security area, DMZ, you want to open connection from outside to inside, so you can configure a broker to initialize a connection from the central server to the poller in the DMZ. But you can be in another way, in a special area, and you want to open connection from the special area to outside, so you can configure Gorgon to initialize the connection from the poller to the central server. So with our architecture, you can define the sense of flow regarding your constraint. Pierrick used to tell about this. So we have a remote servers. So you have a central server with all the configuration and with the capacity to display every data collected. You have remote server, and under remote server you have pollers. Pollers forward collected data to the remote server. So on a remote server, you can display a subset of collected data, and of course on the central server, you can see everything. So previous 20.10, if you use a remote server, you need another flow between the central server and the remote server to call the API of the remote server. Now with 20.10, it's not necessary. So if you used to open this flow in your firewall, you can close this one. So now we only use Gorgon and broker to communicate. Of course, broker is have an encrypted communication. Yeah. And for people used to Centreon before, you know that we used to use SSH, and when Gorgon used to be present, Gorgon used to be compatible with SSH. And now Gorgon, it's only compatible with ZeroMQ, so you need to migrate this system. It's explained in our documentation. So ZeroMQ is a standard. It's a 20.10. So we used to explain that Centreon Gorgon replaced Centcore. Centcore was a main thread, but it was single threaded. Gorgon is multi-threaded and is extensible. And Centreon used this possibility to add modules to Gorgon to offer more capacity. For example, if you use Discovery is based on the Gorgon module. If you want to use anomaly detection, you will see the next webinar. Anomaly detection use Gorgon modules to perform some action. So Gorgon is multi-thread and extensible, and of course respect all security standards. So it means bye-bye SSH. You need to migrate SSH protocol on ZeroMQ. And as explained you, we used to replace SSH. We want to have a capacity to open flow from a side to another side, from poller to central, from central to poller, from remote server to central. So we choose a standard, we choose a ZeroMQ to perform this action.
All right. So I guess here the big information is that in 20.10, all the platforms must go to ZeroMQ and cannot use SSH, but the flow is still fully encrypted with many different options that maybe you will show us in the documentation.
Yes, if we access to the documentation, it explains you how to configure Centreon Gorgon. So if you have main configuration, you have the possibility to change the encryption method. So when you install Gorgon, you have a basic encryption, you have a certificate and a method. You can change this. You can also authenticate the peer for communication. You can make a list of authorized clients, and if the client is not listed by the Gorgon process, communication can't be done. So you can secure your communication. Maybe that I can explain it's if you want to migrate from 20.04 to 20.10, the best way is first to, on your 20.4, to be sure that you use Gorgon everywhere for all communication between your servers, then migrate to 20.10.
Good. All right. I guess that's the end of this presentation. We've covered many different topics, and this is now time for the questions and answers session. So I already have a few questions, but you can continue, typing in your questions. I have two questions about the operating system, CentOS. One is about the documentation. Will you document the procedure to migrate from CentOS 7 to CentOS 8 when we have a dedicated server for database, which is not on the central server?
For the migration, yes. In the migration procedure, we will explain how to perform a migration, even if you have database on the central server or not. Yes, you will have a subpart of migration procedure that will explain you how to do.
Okay, in both situations, dedicated database
yes.
server or not. All right. Another question is, when do you think you will stop allowing Centreon on CentOS 7, or when will it be mandatory to migrate to CentOS 8? Is it in the near future or what?
Good question. Currently, we don't know. We will continue to support Centreon 20.04 and 20.10 on CentOS 7 and 20.10 on CentOS 8. We don't know. It will depend of dependencies. We know that we have to perform a PHP upgrade from 7.2 to 7.3. It will depend if the next version of dependency will be available on CentOS 7, and if it's not available on CentOS 7, unfortunately, we will stop the support, but we don't make the choice yet. It will depend of future development. But of course, we will provide information to our customer to explain when we will stop the support.
All right. Good. I have two questions from Germany. The first one, I'm not sure I fully understand it. I'll read it and you'll see. For OpenID Connect, is it possible to configure normal user access with that method and only specific identity provider for use with local authentication?
If I understand correctly, in Centreon, you have the possibility to use both authentication, local and OpenID, or you can use only OpenID. If for you the local authentication is based on LDAP and you enable OpenID, if the user click on local, he could put his login and password from Active Directory and get logged in Centreon, or do the same with OpenID. I don't know if I correctly answered to the question.
My understanding, it's one or the other or both. You either have the regular login password, which is the local authentication from LDAP, or you have the OpenID Connect with a dedicated button on the user interface, which redirect to the identity provider, which can implement OpenID Connect. And you can have both on the same platform, but Centreon will use one or the other. And if you are doing local authorization, you don't have OpenID Connect.
But if you want to keep both on Centreon, you will have both button on the login page, and you choose on which button you want to click.
All right. If that's not clear, I will put your email address so that that person can ask directly the questions in case of our answer is not totally clear. Another question is it possible to run the web UI on a dedicated server, meaning that the broker and engine are running on one server and the web UI only on another server? How can I configure that as only the engine marked as local host will be shown as central?
Currently, we need a central engine on the central server, but it's only to test the configuration before to be exported to the distant poller. In our roadmap, we have a plan to remove this, to don't install a central engine on the central server. And today we have a central broker because we need to store RD database on the central server. If in the future we change this to another system, maybe yes, in the future you can have the possibility to have the central server only with Apaches and broker on another server. Currently with 20.10, no. You need to have a central server with broker, engine, and Apache, even if you don't use engine to collect data.
Okay, so you can have many pollers, but that kind of internal poller, even if you don't use it to actually monitor, it's mandatory, it's required. You may configure no host on it. It will not monitor any host, but it needs to be here for various technical reasons.
Yes.
Okay. I think the question about OpenID was different. It was about specify IP address for local authentication. And then, but you know, we will probably try to answer this question through emails. It will be maybe easier. And on the last question about this internal poller, can I disable the localhost poller then?
I suppose yes. On the web interface, you can disable it. Yes.
Because it's not polling any data.
Or you can use it to monitor the status of the other pollers.
All right. Good. Thank you. I'm looking, is there any questions? No, I think we've answered all the questions. Thank you very much for all of you for attending this webinar. You will receive an email in the coming days with a link to the video on YouTube so that you can see it again or share it with your colleagues. Next week, in exactly 1 week, same time, same place, we will have Samir Brizini, who's also a product manager at Centreon, talking about how we implement artificial intelligence and machine learning and the new cloud augmented architecture. So please, if you haven't done so, subscribe to this webinar, register to this webinar, and I'll be very happy to join you next week. Until now, have a good day, and I will say goodbye.